complex chemistry and nature's primary mechanism for controlling the climate begins to break down.
You lose a coral reef, you lose perhaps 500,000 species. You lose those little coccolithophores, these little algae, and you start to lose things that are very important to life on this planet. We're losing some of the most vital elements of the way the world works, and that's got us all concerned.
Scientists half a world away share those concerns. They're investigating global warming at the climate's opposite extreme. It took nature 150,000 years to make the Great Greenland Ice Sheet that's now melting into the sea faster than at any time in history. As it disappears, rising oceans will flood coastal cities around the world. Greenland's Jakobshavn Glacier is the fastest moving ice field on the planet, more than 40 meters per day, melting into the sea twice as fast as a decade ago. In just 2 days, the amount of ice breaking off the glacier contains enough water for the New York metropolitan area for 1 year.
One of the greatest concerns about what will happen if the planet continues to get warmer is the stability of the ice sheets. And the danger is that the ice sheet could begin to collapse very rapidly.
Rising temperatures are transforming one of the Earth's harshest climates, disrupting the way people have lived in Greenland for hundreds of years. For as long as anyone can remember, sled dogs have been a symbol of wealth here and a necessity for survival, especially for hunting across the winter sea ice. When the winter ice started thinning, dogs became an expense most islanders couldn't afford. In this town of 4,500 people, there are 4,000 dogs, with very little to do these days. Many are starving. Some are being put down. Marit Holm is one of Greenland's 5 veterinarians. As she patrols the town of Ilulissat, she sees the impact of climate change in every sled dog without a sled to pull.
So that's what I do. I drive around and look after the dogs.
The dogs are hungry, so I have to be a little bit careful not to get bitten. And when the dogs are hungry, you know, they are a little bit more dangerous to people and kids walking around. It doesn't seem to be sick. He's very skinny. So I have to try to find out who's the owner and talk to him.
These animals were once in peak physical condition. They served a vital purpose in their owners' lives.
That's a thing of the past, and we don't see any young people who takes some dogs and live as a fisherman and a hunter.
Dogs have been in Finn Sistel's family as long as he can remember. He finally gave up his team of 19 just in the last few years.
In the winter, even though it was an impossible thing to do about 20 years ago, most of the fishermen go out with a boat today instead of dog sleds.
When Finn was growing up, this was their winter hunting ground. Solid ice for more than half the year.
Everything happens so fast. It's so visible, you don't have to be a scientist to determine what's happening.
With each passing season, Finn watches as traditions locked in the ice melt away.
There's something interesting in the side because you can see small bubbles. And these bubbles are older than all living creatures in the world. And you can listen to it. Because the bubbles are so compressed. And when they get out, it's like popping. You can talk to the ice.
That's what an intrepid team of scientists does once a year. Fly into Greenland's interior to listen to the ice. Swiss Camp is a scientific research installation built directly into the glacier to track climate change. Dr. Conrad Steffens leads the team that has to dig out every spring. Lately, he's found areas of the glacier that hadn't melted in thousands of years, covered in water every summer.
I just checked the weather station and guess what?
What?
It's not getting colder.
Oh, why not?
Yeah, we have record temperatures again in early January.
Some experts predict 2 degrees of warming could be enough to dismantle the glacier completely, but that would take thousands of years. Steffens suspects we could reach a tipping point much more rapidly, within the next 50 years, when melting would become unstoppable. To find out, he must venture even further out across the ice sheet. Steffens has erected 23 full-service weather stations that take a complete range of climate measurements every 15 seconds, updating global warming computer models all over the world.
The ice sheet is very old. It's over 150,000 years old. If we start to remove it, then we actually start a process that is unknown to civilization. We have never seen Greenland disappearing. Watch it, watch it, watch it.
In 1992, 5.6 kilometers of glacier was slipping into the sea and disappearing. 10 years later, that number more than doubled to 15.5 kilometers annually. Steffens wouldn't understand how warmer weather affects the speed of glaciers until he came upon one of the strangest and most dangerous features of this forbidding landscape. Rivers of melted ice are cascading straight down into the glacier, creating huge tunnels called moulins. The team lowers a fiber optic camera. Their hypothesis? That meltwater has cut all the way through to the bedrock a quarter of a mile below and is lubricating the underside of the glacier, propelling it faster and faster into the sea.
50 meters, my God.
60 meters. 70 meters.
For Steffens and his team, it is a chilling moment. This shaft, and many like it, go all the way through the glacier, revealing a whole new mechanism for speeding the ice sheet's disappearance. It's melting so rapidly now, oceans could rise as much as a meter over the next century. The consequences could be catastrophic.
The Greenland ice sheet actually contains enough frozen water to raise global sea levels by about 7 meters, which is enough to flood most of London, Bangkok, New York, Shanghai, you name it.
Many scientists focus on 2 degrees of warming as the tipping point that will fundamentally change how we live on this planet.
We are very close to the slippery slope right now. Some scientists already say it's probably too late to save the Arctic. I don't agree with that, but I do think we're very close to going to a situation where we would have no ice in the Arctic in the warm season.
This could be where global warming becomes a runaway train. Warming accelerates the loss of polar ice. The loss of ice accelerates warming. More water from melting ice absorbs more of the sun's heat, melting the ice sheet and heating the planet even faster. The warmer it gets, the faster it gets warmer. That's when global warming becomes a chain reaction we can't easily predict. Many solutions already available could, in combination, avoid the +2 degree tipping point. They add up quickly. From switching to fluorescent light bulbs to increasing the efficiency of the world's coal power plants by just 20%. Together, solutions like these can have an enormous impact before we start making irreversible changes to the Earth's primary climate control systems. If a rise of 2 degrees doesn't push the planet to the tipping point, many scientists predict 3 degrees will. If the world warms by 3 degrees, the Arctic is ice-free all summer. The Amazon rainforest is drying out. Snow caps on the Alps all but disappear. El Niño's extreme weather patterns become the status quo. The Mediterranean and parts of Europe wither in searing summer heat. This could be our world +3 degrees.
In a 3-degree warmer world, these kinds of summer heat waves will just be the norm. So an extremely hot summer by this point will actually bring the kinds of temperatures into Central Europe that you now experience in the Middle East and in Northern Africa.
The summer of 2003 may have opened a window onto life in a world that's 3 degrees warmer. All across Europe, an unrelenting heat wave developed into a natural disaster. Paris tends to empty in the summer. Many elderly stay behind. Nobody could have anticipated the danger they'd be in.
Jamais auparavant, j'aurais cru que...
Never before would I have thought it possible that one could die of heat stroke at the beginning of the 3rd millennium in Paris.
C'était une prise de conscience terrible.
It was a terrible awakening.
Emergency room doctors were the first to realize something was terribly wrong.
Vers le 6, 7, 8 août.
Around the 6, 7, 8 of August, we started getting red flag warnings.
Les malades arrivaient et mouraient.
The patients arrived and died from heat. This was not a pathology we used to be faced with.
Emergency room Dr. Patrick Pellew quickly realizes the heat wave is turning into a catastrophe.
Vous avez eu une telle vague de chaleur.
You had such a heat wave comparable to a flamethrower igniting an entire area.
Le nombre de personnes qui sont mortes dans la nuit du 10
The number of people who died on the night of August 10 is between 2,500 and 3,000.
The city's distinctive metal roofs were designed for an earlier era to protect against winter chill. Now rising temperatures have turned them against the Parisians.
À Paris, les toits sont faits.
In Paris, the roofs are made of tin. Inside, the houses became a real oven.
The death toll would top 30,000 across Europe. In France alone, over 14,000 died in just a few weeks.
The heat wave of 2003 was probably the first huge catastrophe due to global warming that affected a rich country. A rich country that thought itself to be protected from everything. Well, that was wrong.
If global warming increases to 3 degrees, it won't be the end of all life in Paris. But the character of this great city could be changed forever when extreme summer heat waves start coming every summer. During the heat wave of 2003, another little-noticed phenomenon among Europe's trees and plants was unfolding, a kind of vegetation backlash. Photosynthesis was breaking down. Under normal conditions, plants and trees are a first line of defense against greenhouse gases, absorbing CO2, then converting it into oxygen and releasing it back into the atmosphere. But in the extreme heat that summer, some plants retained oxygen, releasing CO2 into the atmosphere instead. Philippe C.S., a carbon cycle scientist, noticed unusually high levels of CO2 in satellite images of Paris.
We saw a large release of atmospheric carbon dioxide to the air from the vegetation. The trees were not able to take CO2 like they normally do, but they were releasing CO2, outgassing CO2 to the atmosphere.
What happens to the biosphere if one of the planet's most important mechanisms for converting CO2 into oxygen stops working on a regular basis? Possible answers are emerging here at England's Hadley Centre, one of the world's foremost facilities for forecasting where our climate could be headed. Massive supercomputers factor in millions of weather variables to project the impact of global warming all over the planet. Trying to peer decades into the future keeps climate modelers at their desks over time.
Tea and coffee?
One of their toughest challenges is calculating the effect of +3 degree warming on the Amazon rainforest, where 20% of the world's oxygen is produced.
We wanted to know how climate change in the future would affect tropical rainforests, and in particular the Amazon, because it is such an iconic region, it's important both environmentally, ecologically and economically.
The climate model produces an ominous prediction. 3 degrees of warming could trigger a catastrophic feedback loop, accelerating global warming even more, possibly reducing one of the wettest places on Earth into a patchwork of arid savanna.
When you've seen these predictions of potentially enormous changes, and you think, well, yes, it's a very different world that our children are going to see, you can't help but be affected by it.
Occasionally it takes someone to come from outside and say, well, do you know what that means, don't you? You're talking about the death of the Amazon.
Summer 2005, the Amazon River. Extreme heat teems with the driest conditions anyone can remember. It's the perfect drought. Few can recall a time on the mightiest river in the world when its tributaries ran dry, not low, dirt dry.
In 2005, we saw a situation in the Amazon which was just incredible. It was completely off the scale. The Brazilian army actually had to fly by helicopter huge quantities of water up the dried up Amazon tributaries in order to stop people dying of thirst in villages which are normally on the edge of this enormous river.
First drought, then fire. In the aftermath of summer 2005, over 2,500 square kilometers of the rainforest burn. In the upper Xingu Park, the Kaseji tribe is on the front lines as the battle escalates. A fierce warrior tribe, they now face an invisible new enemy, one that could destroy their forest. The Kaseji men prepare for the struggle with a war dance for strength, passed down from their ancestors. In the past, they have fought to defend their land against commercial agriculture and deforestation. But this opponent is elusive. It comes armed with deadly drought and fire. Chief Kuisi already notices changes.
We used to be able to look at the stars, at the Milky Way, and know exactly when the rains would come for planting. But we cannot see any reliable pattern anymore. They do not come.
The Kaseji rely on the river, the rains, and the forest for their survival. Trees help generate 50% of the water for rainfall in the Amazon. As more forest is lost, the very source of the Amazon's rainfall diminishes.
For every tree that we lose, we're making one more incremental step towards a scenario of drought and fire in the region.
Ecologist Daniel Nepstad has been studying the Amazon for over 25 years and sees global warming and deforestation pushing the region toward a tipping point.
We think that maybe as early as 20 years from now, we're going to see what we call positive feedbacks kick in, these vicious cycles of drought leading to fire, leading to more drought. And that's much sooner, of course, than the climate models are giving us.
In the extreme conditions of a world warmer by 3 degrees, losing much of the Amazon could cause the re-release of hundreds of millions of tons of stored carbon, perhaps intensifying global warming another degree.
If we get to 30 years from now and the Amazon is brushland, I think I would look back and say, we had a chance to save one of the world's great treasures.
A world warmer by 3 degrees could finally tip the balance on runaway global warming. Nothing in our past prepares us for these extreme conditions. A time when the rare 100-year storm becomes a common event. In a world warmer by 3 degrees, climate change could be manifest in the most violent weather humans have ever experienced.
People don't yet realize the changes that we're talking about could really lead to a different planet.
As the oceans get hotter and hotter, a new global climate pattern emerges, mirroring the violent weather anomaly we call El Niño. But in a 3-degree world, those extreme conditions could become the status quo. There's evidence for this in the past.
Back in the Pliocene, for example, when it was about 3 degrees warmer than it is now, the whole ocean circulation pattern in the Pacific was different, and there was essentially a permanent El Niño.
Normally, the trade winds drive warm ocean currents toward the western Pacific, leaving cold, nutrient-rich waters along the coast of South America. El Niño turns that system upside down. The first signs are wild fluctuations in air pressure. The trade winds weaken and completely change direction. Warm water spreads east across the Pacific. Torrential rains and flooding strike coastal South America. Indonesian rainforests and Australian farmland experience extreme drought conditions. And many climate models include another troubling forecast. Continued warming could turbocharge a new generation of superstorms.
In a world which is 3 degrees warmer, there's going to be a lot more energy in the world's oceans to drive hurricanes. And hurricanes derive their rocket fuel from the warming of the ocean.
Scientists are still investigating a connection between global warming and hurricane strength. Lately, they have seen more violent storms. Hurricanes are rated on a scale of 1 to 5. One study concludes in the last 30 years, there have been twice as many severe storms. The summer of 2005 would bring dramatic new evidence. In late August, a Hurricane Hunter aircraft is dispatched over the Gulf of Mexico. A colossal storm is building and tracking straight for the city of New Orleans. Anyone left there has only one word in mind: Katrina. By Sunday, August 28th, Katrina's winds reached 280 kilometers per hour. Thermal imagery along the storm track reveals Katrina's clout. Orange and red indicate the sea temperature has risen to 82 degrees Fahrenheit, a full degree higher than normal. Dropping pressure within the eye wall is the 4th lowest ever recorded for an Atlantic storm. It revs Katrina even more. When Hurricane Katrina makes landfall in New Orleans, it unleashes a terrible fury. Within 6 hours, the storm is on its way out of the city. But the destruction of New Orleans only gets worse, transforming the natural disaster into a national tragedy. Jazz trumpeter Irvin Mayfield grew up in New Orleans. The storm surge and a breach at the London Avenue Canal sent 2.5 meters of water into Mayfield's neighborhood. His father stays to protect the family home. His body won't be found for weeks.
When someone has lost their high school, their junior high school, their elementary school, their pictures, their videotapes, their clothes, their friend's house, their friend's mother's house, their barber shop, the place they had their first kiss, you know, when you lose all